noticed in the leaflet, we're going to be talking about how Caleb was faithful to the Lord. And it was said several times throughout the scripture there about Caleb that he was fully obedient, or fully obeyed the Lord, or obeyed him completely. And so, again, Caleb followed the Lord completely, and we'll notice some things right quick about like I said before, I love computers. Sorry about that. We're talking about Caleb. You remember that in Numbers 13, and there's Numbers passage here we're not going to look at. We just put the references down for a future reference for those who want to look at them. But we noticed that they sent spies into the land, Numbers 13. Also, they spent about 40 days there, and they were bringing good news and bad news. The land was a land of milk and honey. It also was a land of giants. Caleb sought to reassure the people. The 10 spies did just the opposite, actually. And only Joshua and Caleb then had the confidence in the Lord that they could go up and take the land. So the people took ear to the 10 spies and were not willing to go up. And because they were not willing to go in, the Lord told them that the spies went in the land for 40 days, and so that they were going to have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Those 10 spies that brought back a negative report, they died by a plague. So only Joshua and Caleb were spared. They were the only ones that out of that group that came out of Egypt, 20 years and older, that were able to go into and possess the promised land. In Numbers 14:24, we read there, my servant Caleb, because he had a different spirit and followed me fully, I will bring him into the land that he entered, and his descendants shall possess or take possession of it. What does it mean to follow the Lord fully or wholly as Caleb did? How might we follow Christ in the same way? Can we follow him fully or wholly? What is it to follow Jesus completely or wholly? To follow Jesus in our days, such as Caleb followed the Lord in Joshua, the 14th chapter and beginning with verse 8. Nevertheless, my brethren, who went with me, made the hearts of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord, my God, fully. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot trod will be your inheritance, or be an inheritance to you and to your children forever, because you have followed the Lord fully. As we've already mentioned, what is it to fulfill or to follow Christ wholly or fully? Lost it? Okay. The last we want to mention, I've left out a little bit there, messing with the slides. But Caleb followed fully, but many of them did not. If you go back to Exodus, Genesis, the 18th and 19th chapters, you find that 3 men appear to Abraham, talking to him about having children. But he also, in the 19th chapter, talked about Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. And Abraham talked with God and said, if we can find 50 souls, will you spare it? If you find 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, the Lord said, yes, we can find 10. We'll spare the city. They couldn't find 10, couldn't find 5. 4 of them came out. They were led out by the men or the angels. But if you notice, verse 26 of Genesis 19, Lot's wife, from behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. We find something in the book of Galatians, the 3rd chapter, that would apply to us, and it applied definitely to them back then, that is the Galatians. In Galatians 3 and verse 1, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. Now you remember in the 1st chapter, he talks to them and says, I am amazed, I marvel that you're so quickly removed and following a different gospel, which isn't a different gospel at all, it's not even a gospel. And so here he's saying, you're so quickly deceived, bewitched there. And so he's having trouble getting the Galatians to continue to follow. Also, if we go to 1 Timothy, the 4th chapter, notice what Paul tells Timothy. He said, let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself to be an example to those who believe. Titus, the 2nd chapter, verses 1 through 5. But as for you, speak the things which are fitting for sound doctrine. Older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in the faith, in love, in perseverance. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, not slave to much wine, teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sensible, pure workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God may not be dishonored. But then going back to Psalms, the 92nd chapter and verse 12 following, the righteous man will flourish like a palm tree. He will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in a house of the Lord, they will flourish in the court of our God. They will still yield fruit in its old age. They shall be full of sap and very green. To declare the Lord is upright, he is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Shall we follow Jesus like Caleb followed the Lord? How much? All of our days. Caleb followed God fully or wholly. We have a warning in Matthew, the 22nd chapter, if we're going to follow Jesus. He says, teachers, or teachers. Let me back up. Lawyer came to him, tested him, and said, teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, This is the great and foremost commandment. But sadly, many try to serve the Lord with a divided heart. In 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, in verse 4, notice what we hear about King Solomon. When Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of David his father had been. Also, in James warns us in the 4th chapter in verse 4, you adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. So we might ask, what of us to follow Jesus today? In John the 14th chapter and verse 14, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. But then let's go over to 1 John, the 2nd chapter, verse 15 through 17, where there the apostle writes, do not love the world nor the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away, also its lust. The one who does the will of God lives forever. Again, shall we follow Jesus like Caleb did? Shall we follow him with all of our heart? To follow Jesus might be in despite of or in spite of hazards, problems that come up. Caleb followed the Lord even though there were dangers because of it. And notice, particularly when they came back out of the Canaan, spying out the land. Notice Numbers 13:33. There also we came, the Nephim, the sons of Anak are part of the Nephim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. I wonder sometimes how large those giants were, especially when you look at some of the skeletons they're digging up nowadays. But going on in Numbers, the 14th chapter and verse 10. But the congregation said to stone them with stones. Then the glory of God appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. Caleb tried to persuade him to go in and take the land. He said, no, don't want to do that. Now, if we drop down to verse 11, I've got verse 10 on there again, but look at verse 11, 12. The Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? And how long will they not believe in me? Despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst, I will strike them with pestilence and dispose of them, and I will make you into a greater nation and mightier than they. But did you notice? He says, how long do I have to put up with it? How many miracles, how many things have they seen from the time they left Egypt or before they left, all the plagues, all the deliverance, all the food and things that they got on the way, the water, bitter water made sweet, water from a rock, etc. Now then, do they trust the Lord? He says, how long do I have to put up with it? Why will, or many will serve the Lord only when it's convenient, when it's popular, when it's safe. A man I appreciate sometimes, but he kind of went up and down at times. But in Matthew, the 26th chapter, we read a little bit about Peter, verse 69 to 70. Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, "You too were with Jesus the Nazarene, or the Galilean." And he said, but he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you're talking about." Jesus was on trial. Peter's right out there close by. He knows what's going on. He's not going to admit he's a follower of Jesus. It's not safe. May not even be popular at that minute. How are people today? Should we follow him only when it's convenient? Shall we follow him despite ridicule, persecution, dangers? In Matthew the 5th chapter, beginning with verse 10, "Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets that were before you." Shall we follow Jesus like Caleb followed the Lord despite the hazards or because of the hazards? Well, not because of, but in spite of. Certainly the commitment of Caleb to the Lord is commendable. How was he able to be so committed? How might we be so enabled? How are we able to fully follow the Lord, or follow him fully? We probably need to keep our eyes open. We need to keep our eyes on him. Caleb's faith was in the Lord and not on himself. He was confident that they would take the land, or that they could take the land. 13:30 of Numbers. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome." He knew where the victory was. But his faith in him. But that was because he knew the Lord would be with him. Again, back in Numbers 14, Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of those who had spied out the land tore their clothes, and they spoke to the congregation, the sons of Israel, saying, "The land which we have passed through to spy out is exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, and a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land." Now notice, "for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear." Do not be afraid of them. Look at what the writer, the Hebrew writer, Hebrew letter says to us, beginning with Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, and fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. considered himself who has endured such hostilities by sinners against himself, so that you might not grow weary and lose heart. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding of blood in your striving against sin. Now, of course, the writer was talking to the Hebrew children or Hebrew Christians there, and they were having a tendency to want to leave at that time. Some of them were leaving, I guess. But he's trying to encourage them and telling them at that time, you haven't resisted, not even to the shedding of blood. The apostles had shed blood by this time. They had hurt by this time, but some of these Christians hadn't. And then I think sometimes got to think, well, I'm having a hard time. No, I haven't shed a drop of blood in being persecuted or made in fun of being a Christian or trying to spread God's word. Shall we look to the Lord for our inspiration and confidence like Caleb did? Caleb was noted for having a different spirit. Numbers 14 and 24. But my servant Caleb, because he had a different spirit and followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall possess it. A different spirit. Spirit that the 10 spies had. They were defeated even before they got there, so they had the attitude of defeated. Numbers 13 and 31. But the man who had gone up with him, we are not able to go against the people, for they are too strong for us. And again, the picture comes into my mind of things I've seen on YouTube lately, and one of the things that supposedly they were digging up, and I don't know whether it's true or not, don't know any reason not to believe them, but they said they had found a skull of a human being about 25 feet tall. If the skull was that tall, how big was the rest of the body? And like I said, I wonder. But even at that, I also noticed on another occasion where they had dug up a skeleton, that the entire skeleton was over 20 feet long. And that would have been a fairly large giant if they lived back at that time. And like I said, I keep wondering whether those are real or not, but I can't refute it. Numbers 14, 1 and 2. Then all the congregation took up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would have died in this wilderness. Other words, we can't do it. We'd be better off dead. We can have a different spirit. We can be strengthened by a different spirit. A verse many people can quote. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengtheneth me. Romans the 8th chapter, verses 12 and 13. So then, brethren, we are under obligation not to the flesh, but to live let me try it again. So then, brethren, we are under obligation not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you are living according to the flesh, you must die. But if by the Spirit you are putting to death the deeds of the body, you will live. And then over in Ephesians 3, in verse 16, that he would grant you, according to his riches of his glory, to be strengthened with the power through his Spirit in the inner man. What can we do? I used the illustration the other night of my big brother when I was at school, grade school, I was first grade. He promised that he would help me if I got in a fight, and I needed it. Well, somebody picked on me, a couple guys, and I was so scared. My older brother, I looked up and he was up on the hill a little ways, and he wasn't coming down, so I figured I could handle those two guys. But I had the confidence in my brother then that I could do it. But I like the power that we've got in Christ. I can do all things through him. He's got that strength. And so we can have a can-do attitude, knowing that we are clothed with the strength that God, in God's might, or God's might. Now then, we could go to Ephesians, the 6th chapter, and verse 13 following, where it says, we're at war, we're in a battle, but not against flesh and blood, but we have a spiritual battle, a supernatural, well, not supernatural, but a spiritual battle there. But again, we've got the assurance that he's with him. So motivation to follow the Lord fully. Consider how God is able to use Caleb as a leader in Israel. Again, back in Numbers 13. Send out for yourselves men so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, each one a leader among them. Then dropping down to verse 6, from the tribe of Judah, Caleb. So he was one of the ones that was chosen to go into the land to spy it out. And then in 34 of Numbers 18 following, you shall take one leader of every tribe to appoint the land of inheritance. These are the names of the men of the tribe. Guess who? Joshua. So he was helped when he went into the land. He's also then helped to divide the land, to give the land as the Lord wants him to do. So he's able to help her. Notice how he's able to use Caleb as a servant for God to spy out the land and then to divide it. Again, 14:24. But my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall own it. He's an example of faith and courage. 13:30 of Numbers. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses, said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we surely will overcome it. He had the faith. 14, verses 8 to 9. If the Lord is pleased with us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. He's able to remind us of God's justice. 14th Numbers 29 and 30. Your corpse will fall in the wilderness, even all the numbers of men according to your complete number from 20 years old and upward, who have grumbled against me. Surely you shall not come into the land which I swore to settle you, except Caleb, Joshua. They were the only two that were able to go into the land. Continuing, verse 6. Then the sons of Judah drew near to Joshua and Gilgal, and Caleb the son of, I have trouble pronouncing his name, the Kenite, said to him, you know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me into Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and brought word back to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren whom went with me made the heart of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord fully. So Moses swore on that day, surely the land which your foot trod will be your inheritance, and your children will be there forever, because you have followed the Lord your God fully. Now behold, the Lord has let me live just as he spoke these 45 years from the time that the Lord spoke the words to Moses, when Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am 85 years old today. Again, along the same line, and let me go ahead and skip just a little bit here, but again, he's verifying that the Lord has been with him. But it leads us to a useful life if we will learn to follow wholly or fully or with our heart. How useful will it be if we do follow him fully? 1 Timothy 4 and verse 12. Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, faith, and purity, show yourself an example to those who believe. 2 Timothy, the second chapter, verses 20 and 22. Now a large house, there are not only gold and silver vessels, but also vessels of wood and of earthenware, and some of honor and some of dishonor. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from these things, he will be a vessel of honor, sanctified, sanctified, useful to the master, prepared for every good works. Now flee youthful lust, and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who calls on God from a pure heart. Did I skip it? Okay. Somehow I got hit a wrong button and skipped a whole bunch. Okay. But he said, it leads us to a faithful life, as we already mentioned. But notice in Matthew 16:33, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Question. Let the example of Caleb inspire us to follow the Lord fully. Will we? To follow Jesus all the days of your life. To follow Jesus with all your heart. To follow Jesus despite the hazards. Don't forget Caleb and Joshua were only two men. Notice that. Joshua and Caleb were only 2 men out of 603,550 men who came out of Egypt, who survived the 40-year wilderness wandering and entered the promised land. Only the 2 of them. The brethren did not enter into Canaan, for the Lord said to them, they have not fully obeyed me. How are we following the Lord? Are we doing it like Caleb? Are we doing it like those who died in the wilderness? A question that we need to stop and think about as we go through life each and every day. The lesson is yours. If you care to sing this next song.